Hi, I'm Lisa MacLeod. I'm the MVP for Nepean, but I'm also an advocate for mental health and concussion awareness. And so I thought I'm going to continue to have mental health minutes after Mental Health Awareness Week because they've been so effective in people sharing their stories and seeking support. Today, I'm joined by two of my great colleagues, Graham McGregor, who is from Brampton North, and of course, Natalie Pierre from Burlington. Both have been incredible advocates in the legislature and sharing with all of us their lived experience. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I'll start with you, Graham. You have disclosed that you are suffering from anxiety and depression, that you're seeking assistance and support. And it really only started when you got to the legislature. You want to talk a little bit about your experience, what made you decide to go public, and any advice that you have for any of our listeners.
Yeah. First, I would say anxiety, not depression.
Okay.
But definitely anxiety, definitely burnout, and things like that have been very big. And one of the things that I always try to be upfront about is the fact that I'm in therapy, because so much about mental health is still so stigmatized, where people feel ashamed or embarrassed to kind of talk about it. And I think, if you had a knee problem, you would never be hesitant to share about it, right? Or you had an ankle problem, or your fingers didn't move properly, or whatever it is. But for some reason, when it's your health in your brain, we're nervous to do it. And anxiety is something I've always had to manage my whole life. But when I got elected, it took on a whole new thing, and these jobs that we have where you're kind of on the lights are on all the time, and people are, expecting you to be something, and you're speaking to large crowds of people all the time. You're constantly trying to keep, 1,000 different facts and figures in your head and maintain 1,000 relationships, et cetera, can be really tough. And I went through a really hard time last fall where, it was hard for me to get up on stage. I actually walked off stage at an event one time, pretend I had a phone call. It was like I was just actually anxious. It was just a panic attack. And therapy really helped, and being upfront about it really helped, and building good life habits, things like getting outside early, drinking water, managing my caffeine levels. All these things are still things that I put into practice today that really help me manage it. But it's a struggle, and it doesn't mean, one thing about mental health, it's not a zero-sum game, right? Or it's not a binary game, where it's, kind of a 1 or a 0. You either have mental health issues or you don't. I think we all have it to some degree. The same way we all have, varying degrees of physical health. And just because you have issues doesn't mean they can't be managed. You just have to manage them and keep going.
And I just wanted to say, so you're a newer member of the legislature. You're now 2 years in. And I remember meeting you as a member, and you had disclosed in the assembly. I mean, I know people in there for the past 18 years that would, not just keep it private, but maybe try to hide a mental health diagnosis. But no, you spoke about it. How did that feel to be on the floor of the assembly? I mean, you worked in politics before. You worked on the Hill. You worked here at Queen's Park. You're elected. And then you just open up.
Yeah. I guess my anxiety lives on the Hansard for forever now. It felt good. I think, we're not elected to be superheroes. At least I certainly, if they wanted one, they elected the wrong person at Brampton North. We're elected to be human beings and to be the citizens' accountability on government. And I believe that. What was really telling to me, one, your speech during that debate was phenomenal. The stories we hear from Natalie, as well. A lot of us talk about it now, probably in a way that we didn't in the past. But what was telling to me the most were the amount of people that came up to me after and said either, thank you for sharing your story. I got a lot of, hey, I'm in therapy too. A lot of people saying, hey, I'm struggling with this or that. How do I manage that? People that are in high demanding jobs, not even just politics, but high demanding jobs generally. We all, it's a very common thing to manage, and everybody kind of deals with it in their own way. And I think for me, it was almost therapeutic in a way, probably. Like, it wasn't something I'd written down and planned to contribute to the debate that day.
No, I think I told everybody they had to throw away their notes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was actually, you said throw away your notes and speak from the heart. And I thought, okay, let's try that. And it's a big thing. I mean, look, the world is a big, scary world anyways. But when you're in a high-stress job and when you're at Queen's Park and anything you say can and will be held against you and it will be written for eternity, and a lot of thoughts can go through your mind. I think it's okay. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to have issues and to seek help for those issues. So it's for me, it was one of the struggles I have as a politician, I think a lot of us do, is how to be authentic, because a lot of our political discourse is, kind of heavy comms driven, and we're always thinking about what message we want to leave, and et cetera, which is important. It's an important part of our system and everything else, but you can't lose yourself while that's happening. And the last thing I'd ever want to be or ever become is a caricature of myself. So moments like that where you get to be authentic with people is good. It's important. Feels good.
So that's why you're one of my superheroes. I'm very proud of you for speaking out and just being a young person in the legislature that had that type of courage. You don't see that sometimes. And so that's amazing. And Natalie, you and I didn't really know each other's stories. We really didn't know each other because I had been off with my bipolar diagnosis. You'd been elected. And I had that speech in the House, and then I wasn't always there, but I gave a talk at the Albany Club with Tony Clement, moderated by Steve Paikin, and I was heartened that you were there. My heart was like, wow, she's, I don't really know Natalie that well, but she's there to listen to me. And then when I went over to thank you, you blew me away. You did, because of your courage and your grace and going through something far more difficult than I have gone through. And I don't want to tell your story. I think that's your story to tell. And but you've been really so open and giving with your story to your colleagues. You're a remarkable woman, a remarkable mother. And why don't I let you tell your story and how in your own words?
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Graham. I wasn't present in the chamber to hear your remarks. And I'm surprised to see you sitting here because I would have never expected to have heard that. And I think it just, reinforces the story that we all have mental health. Some of us have mental health and mental illness, but you can have both. You can have mental health and still struggle with mental illness, just like you can have physical health and struggle with arthritis.
Yeah.
We both have both. At the same time, they exist in all of us.
I see shit.
Yeah. And so when I think about stigma and I think about, I spend a lot of time thinking about the definitions of those. And I think back to my days in algebra with Venn diagrams, and you have two circles and it's the mental health versus mental illness with the two circles. I see them as the same thing, right? You can have mental health. And we all have mental health, yes, is what I'm trying to say. So I would say the reason that I'm here, sitting on this sofa and in this room with you today, is because of my experience with mental health. So my son died by suicide in 2017. He was 17 years old. And that happened, I guess maybe 4 or 5 months after I lost my brother-in-law in the same way. And so that was something that I didn't know, is that it's not unusual if there is a suicide in a family to have another one. That was a big surprise. And I started to think a lot about what I didn't know. And after my son died, just in the days after, I received a phone call from the school principal who said, "What do you want us to tell people?" And I said, "Well, the truth." And it just it's a tough conversation to have with people. Not everybody can. I don't share my story with everyone, although I'm here today sharing it with lots of people. But it's hard news to share because not everyone can handle that. It's heavy. So probably about a year after my son died, I decided to try and do something differently, and thought about, if myself as a 52-year-old woman at the time didn't know about suicides running in families, and it's not unusual for them to happen the way it happened in my family, maybe there's an opportunity to talk to young people and to teach people, kind of what are the signs, what are the symptoms, where can you go to get help, and just really giving students and empowering them with the information and knowledge that they need to take care of their mental health. And if they're struggling, where do you reach out to get help?
So tell us a little bit about that work and who you got to meet.
Sure.
Where you got to go. Like, what did you hear? Where were the problems? What was working?
Well, I went to the school boards. I went to the provincial government. I went to public health. I went to the provincial government. I went to the federal government. I went to regional government. Went everywhere, and ended up connecting with the member of Burlington prior to me taking office, MVP Jane McKenna, and her office staff. And it was MVP McKenna's office that put me in touch with Minister Lecce. And it was a surprise. One night at around 10 o'clock at night, I received a phone call from him saying that he was making an announcement at CAMH. Could I come out? And so he did. And it was just, ever since then, working together. And to your point, Graham, it's talking about stigma, putting it out there. I don't want to use the word normalize, but make it part of everyday conversation so people don't have that same reaction, that it's not something that people bury within themselves, which is what my son did.
Well, and what you say there, not normalize it, but not make it scary. I always say to my family, and not just about mental health, but pretty much anything. Like, if it's out there and it's uncomfortable to see, it needs to be seen.
Right. Imagine what it's like to have in your head.
Yeah. And so you need to uncover, these things. And then here you are, this terrible experience that, those kids, you're never going to get over it. And then you have to make the decision. Am I going to try and save other lives? Which you did. You go with Minister Lecce to that CAMH. Now you're his parliamentary assistant. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of a nice full circle in terms of your professional world. How do you see your role now in advancing your son's memory and legacy in the work that we're doing at Queen's Park, or the work you're doing more specifically?
Well, it's interesting. I never thought about it in terms of advancing his legacy. I just think of it as a way to empower students, empower young people to be better prepared, more information, so that when they're just better equipped when challenges come your way. And I think in my son's case, everything's 2020 in hindsight, but there will be good days and there will be bad days. And it might be one chapter of your story, but it's not the whole book.
Yeah.
And I think what Minister Lecce and our government has done, that no other government has done here in Ontario, is really just giving the students the tools and understanding that, this is mental health, this is mental illness. These are the school supports that are available to you. These are the signs and symptoms that you may recognize in someone else. Maybe that's your friend, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your next door neighbor, maybe it's someone you work with at your part-time job. And so how can you help people?
Now, what about parents? Are there similar tools available for the moms and the dads out there?
Yes, there's tools through School Mental Health Ontario, like in terms of the Ministry of Education, school websites, yeah. And then just in general, there's 211, the Ontario government that will link you up with mental health supports.
Yeah, I'm always trying to find, because there's so many grassroots organizations out there too, like people who've been through it, they have lived experience like both of you, and they see a gap in the system and then they add something that's really integral to society. Now, I want to ask you about this. You mentioned it already, but we have had this private conversation before, and it is when you disclose that you're struggling with a mental illness and that you're not mentally healthy, or when you've lost someone who has died by suicide, as you have, how have, not the general public been, how are the people closest to you and your family, your friends, your close coworkers, have they all been supportive, or have you been surprised by people who kept their distance?
I gotta say, like at least 99% people are supportive. I think frightened at first. Like I think when I was disclosing to some people, like there were times I couldn't drive, because it's just the overstimulation or what have you, and when you explain it to people, sometimes I think all of us as politicians is like, I'm generally a pretty confident guy. People go, how can you be so confident this way, but then what do you mean you can't drive? Or what do you mean you can't, what do you mean, walking out of your house and standing on your porch is weird and you feel dizzy? Like, what are you talking about? Graham, I've seen you talk in front of 500 people. These two things don't make sense. But overwhelmingly supportive. And I think the more open I was about it, the better I got, the more supportive people were. And then, I incorporate good mental health practices in my work. When I do meetings in Brampton, I book a lot of walking meetings, because we know getting out in the sunlight and walking and that kind of light cardio is so good for your brain.
Smart.
I book breaks in my schedule, which is, most people have breaks. I didn't really do it well. But because I was always just so,
focused,
efficient, boom, 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 boom. Let's do as many meetings and affect as much change as we can in as little time as we can. So, giving yourself that grace and realizing that people will give you that grace, I think is just so,
what a great word, grace.
So key. Right. And for me, I saw what happened when I didn't do the little things, how big of a problem it became. And I've seen coming out the other side, and I still we're managing, right? But I feel great now, and it's doing all the little things well. Really helps, and I think the more open you are about that, the more people will help you do those little things well.
Yeah. What about you, Nat?
Well, it's interesting. I'll make one comment about driving. So after my son died, I didn't drive either. I was in a state of trauma. My brain still couldn't comprehend what had happened, but I didn't drive, at least for 6 months, probably longer, just because I didn't feel that I was able to make those split-second decisions that you need to be able to make when you're driving a vehicle, and I just didn't trust myself to have the mental capacity, the ability to react quickly.
Right.
So I just
I've barely driven in the past 6 years.
Yeah.
Since I started experiencing my challenges. It becomes mentally exhausting to think about getting in the car, starting the car, looking at the window, driving, figure out where I'm going to go. It's just, so my husband will really mostly drive me to everything now.
Wow.
Yeah. And see, there's something that I learned today. Right? I thought that was just an experience that I had on my own.
Yeah. So something the three of us shares.
It was terrifying. The long drives for me, when I'm very mentally unwell and it's, overstimulated, burnout, stressed, it's the long drives, because that's when you start to think about all the little things that you didn't do, or for me, the mounting pressures, or I start to really dive into questions that I have or whatnot. And then it's like, you're like locked in the car. You can't do anything about it. So you're like stuck on the highway, and it was terrible for me.
It's speech writing time.
Right. For me, it's good podcasting time or good what have you. And when I'm healthy, it's fine. I love a long drive when I'm healthy. But it was something that took me a while through the fall. Like it was like, and I'd gone through anxiety and things certainly in the past. This fall was different. It was just the level of burnout, the level of stress. It was just it was like the straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. But we're
happy you're back.
Yeah, we're rebounding. I feel really good.
Yeah,
I feel really good.
So I just want to go back to you about the people, because losing a child and then losing a child to suicide is both are difficult, but and both I think people have different reactions to, but it's particularly profound when it's something that the public or the people or the hospital or something, nobody can explain, right? Nobody really can explain it. So because I want to know, I think that there's still stigma attached to suicide, or and that we don't talk enough about.
We don't. I will say from my own personal experience, there were people who carried me through those months, but they showed up at my door. They took care of me, and my family. Yeah. And then there were other, people who I had, good relationships with, just came in and carried me through those months.
Oh, those.
And then there was other people who, in the grocery store, would see you coming down the aisle with your grocery cart, and they would go the other way. Right. So, that was hard. I understand, because it's awkward and you don't know what to say. Sorry. I want to tear up a little bit.
Oh, you're just such a wonderful.
But I call those kind of secondary losses. And it's, a friendship that didn't survive that. Right. So someone that you were very close with, who for some reason is no longer in your life. And I don't know if it's because it's a heavy burden. Yeah. It's a heavy burden for everyone. It's difficult to share the story. And it's difficult for people to hear it. And so there's people who ask me, it's always funny. So I will tell you a funny story, and it's funny, not funny. So it was probably a year later, and a friend of mine who was one of the people who kind of carried me through the first year said, "Come, we're going to take sailing lessons." I was like, "Okay, we'll take sailing lessons." So we took sailing lessons, and then there was a classroom component and there's a sailing component. So we're in the classroom one day and we're on a break, and there's some chitter chatter, and one of the other students said, "So how many kids do you have?" And I had to take a breath, and I had to think, okay, how do I answer the question? Do I have one or do I have two? And so I took a moment, and the instructor for the course said, "What, you don't know how many children you have?" I don't.
How do you?
Right? Because sometimes, not everyone gets to hear my story. Sometimes I don't want to tell my story because I'm not in a place to tell it. And sometimes I'm not. It's tough to watch the reaction of people. Yeah. And then moving forward, the relationship that I have with that person, and I've seen it, is forever different. So I call it the pity look. I get that.
Then none of us are going to look at you.
Yeah, I know. I just look away.
Yeah, but I'm still some of the same person. I'm not the same person I was before.
Yeah.
I'm probably a very small part of the person that I was before. But it's tough when that's the only part of you that people see.
Well.
So.
Well, we're fortunate to see you as a colleague, a strong woman, a resilient woman, And we've only known you, since 2022.
3 years.
And and you've been an absolutely remarkable colleague, a great friend, I would say, and really, really proud to sit with both of you. Now, just, I guess, one final question for both of you, and I'll start with you, Natalie, and it will be the same one, Graham, so you can just top up after. In your community in Burlington and Brampton North, oh, heavens, you have to have a really amazing, at least one, and I'm sure you have many, at least one really incredible resource for people to go to help them with their mental health or their declining mental health or their mental illness. I, for example, could say the Services Bureau, Robert Smarts. I have a laundry list in Ottawa. If you're looking at your constituents today and they're struggling, where would you send them at home?
So we have an organization in Burlington called the Reach Out Center for Kids. So that for any young person that's struggling with mental health, it's Reach Out Center for Kids. Full stop.
Good. Excellent.
We had a few. We actually have pretty unique, full-fledged kind of mental health department out of William Osler that do fantastic work. But we've got good community resources too. Roots Community Services, more focused on the Black community and some of the kind of unique traumas that people can have. An organization I really want to shout out, a group of young guys that are killing it in Brampton, called Rediscover. And it's a group of high school students. They partnered with a professor from Trent University, and they do mental health programming starting at Harold Brathwaite School, which is one of the schools in my riding, near Silver City, if anyone knows where that is, and they know Brampton. But they, it's a group of 16 and 17-year-old kids that have really, they've popularized it in the schools. And I do believe good habits, again, getting good habits early can help prevent some of the big problems later on, from the preventative side. They're absolutely awesome. I know they're working to expand to more schools. So shout out to the Rediscover team. They're excellent.
Well, and excellent is you two as colleagues. So I want to thank you for doing this. You are going to make such a difference. I know that every time I post on mental health awareness, there's somebody that comes back and says, thank you. I think, Graham, the fact that you're a young professional, brand newly elected, you're going to be a role model to a lot of people. And the fact that you can say, I can do this, I have some challenges, but I can deal with those challenges and do that job, that's pretty incredible. You should be very proud of yourself. And Natalie, your story is so difficult. It's so heart-wrenching. But you show up here every day as a legislator. You're doing things to make Ontario a better place, your community in Burlington a better place. And I know it's difficult to share your story, but we're so blessed that you chose to today, because people that are watching this are going to see 3 MPPs who have dealt with trauma or mental health issues or mental illness. And they can say that truly when there is a debate happening on the floor of the Legislative Assembly, that they are not alone, because people like the 3 of us will be up there debating and making sure that those policies reflect people like us. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who've taken the time to watch this episode of A Mental Health Minute. And again, I'm just joined by 2 incredible and inspiring colleagues, Natalie Pierre, who is from Burlington, and Graham McGregor, who's not wearing a kilt. And he is, of course, from Brampton North. Thank you very much.